Efed podcast, the podcast exploring our fantasy wrestling hobby, where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real. I'm your host, Mikey Unlikely, and I'd like to thank you for joining us here on the Atomic Dropcast Network. Hey everybody, welcome in for another episode of the Efed podcast, episode 24, and this week on the show we've got a bona fide Efed legend. Not that one, guys. You probably know him, or you know someone who knows him. It's Tom Ford, handler of Jack Harmen, aka High Flyer, and the D of the Pop Culture Phenoms, as well as many other side characters. We've got a brand new Efed spotlight this week, as always, and we've got an Efed podcast question of the week that I can't wait to get your answers on. If you guys want to interact with the show, check us out on Twitter at the Efed podcast. That's where we post the show. We post the question of the week each and every week. Right there pinned to the top of the profile. You can hit the comment section, post your comment, and it will be featured here on the show. You can also check out the Discord. The link is right in the Twitter profile. Once you're in there, the OGs will get you acquainted. It's our own little Efed community. We've got guys from the Caw Feds, Angle Feds, RP Feds, and more chilling in there talking about the entire hobby and wrestling as a whole. Come check it out, the Discord. And of course, the Efed podcast is a totally free podcast that will now air every Tuesday for the public. However, if you'd like to support the show and get some extra perks, including the show 2 days early, head on over to patreon.com/Efed podcast for only $3 a month. You can catch the show 2 days early. And we've got a lot of other perks and levels for you to check out. We just recorded our first monthly Q&A with Brian and I last night. You can check that out over at the patreon.com/Efed podcast. Before we get into the show today, let's get a word from our sponsors.
Hello, this is Megan, Bedhead over at 5EWWrestling.com, and come check out 5EW Ghost Canadian A, April 26, 2020, with Team Tolson Anderson going against Team Luciana in War Games. Hope you guys check it out. Thanks.
Defiance, an Angle Fed boasting 8 years of continuous fantasy wrestling. Defiance offers opportunities for original characters, micros, a standalone website utilizing Backstage 3 script, and a forum hosted on the long-running FWrestling.com, as well as a roster full of some of the most experienced writers in the game. Come see for yourself at DefianceWrestling.com. That's DefianceWrestling.com.
The Efed question of the week.
The Efed question of the week is brought to you by the EWC. The Extreme Wrestling Corporation is the game's longest-running roleplay Efed, having been established in 1997. With over 100 active role players across 4 unique brands, the EWC offers opt-in booking on all of its bi-weekly shows. It's home to Stranglemania and the 4-day wrestling festival known as WrestleFest. The EWC is built on its welcoming community with zero bias and no drama. All styles are welcome. Come check out the EWC today at EWC4life.com. That's EWC, the number 4, life.com. All right, guys, it's time for the question of the week. The segment where I put a question up on Twitter and you guys answer it, and I read your questions on the air. You can check that out at the Efed podcast on Twitter. Here we go. On the Twitter side, our question is, whether RP or Angle, do you utilize the character development section of your Fed? Why or why not? On the Twitter side, we got answers from @Sean_Warstein, our old good buddy Fuzz. I have, but it's few and far between. It's usually when I have more story than the limits allow. That's a great point. In roleplay feds where you have a word limit, sometimes there's more to tell, and there's nowhere else to post it other than the character development. @TW Combat, hell yeah, that's part of the fun of creating a character. Each character should have a history and a personal life outside of wrestling or MMA, so share that character's backstory. That's a great perspective. @JVD Rooster, I have used it on occasion, especially if it's outside the realm of using it for a promo. Often for background or flashback purposes to help set up the character's backstory or reasoning for future use. Sometimes it's just good to vent out interaction with someone's character. Good stuff. Thanks, JVD. At Whammy Bar. I mostly do it in my RPs, sometimes to give my character a storyline outside wrestling, other times to fill in on his backstory. Some may not agree, but CD is important with your character. It helps the person understand them more. As a true story. At Project Holland 3, our old good buddy Eric Holland. Largely I don't, because my intent with my shoot promos is to help you understand Eric's character and motivations while he's in front of a camera. CD would be, in my mind, more appropriate for a segment like a hype for a match. Interesting. Haven't thought of it that way. At Distorted Amber, I try to, in that sometimes I need to add extra story elements or further plot points that might not fill into the main RPs for whatever reason. Never major enough that if people don't read them, it won't affect their enjoyment, but enough for those who do to get a little extra. There you go. I think that's what it really is for, and for you to help flesh out yourself. At I'm Smith Jones, I do often. Post-show reactions, press conferences, cryptic messages, anytime I need to drop some info that didn't fit into my RP. I use the CD board to add little moments that help progress my character and or storyline, especially when feeling extra creative. At Starburst Blasts, I utilize it as it allows for the results writers to get ideas for future angles and title shots. Also, it makes for interesting writing. At Efed Wrestler, that's a great handler name. No, if I'm producing something, it's for match or segment use, and that's a shoot. Oh. At Eli Flynn Buck, not as much as I should. I've got so many ideas going through my head, really need to put them down in Word. I'm just not sure anyone wants to read about what's going on in my head. I can understand that perspective as well. Thanks, guys, for answering on the Twitter side. Let's move over to the Discord. All right, we up first on the Discord, we got Judge Megan. I feel like if every Fed has one, the handlers who are there should utilize it instead of it letting it collect dust. There you go. At Jakey, or guy whose profile pic is a fish, or something like that. My character development is included in the RP. I'm gaming the system, baby. You little bitch. Warren Fitz, 45. I only did 1 or 2 in the FWO, but never really seen the point if it was largely ignored. You can't argue that. At Mongo the Destroyer, that's always the issue. If your CD isn't interesting, it doesn't really generate the interest, and it'll kill motivation to do it. I think that's one of the good things about Angle Feds is that theoretically, any promo could be a CD. At least that's how I use it. That's a great perspective. At hashtag Pete for Frappes, I have always either done standalone character development or incorporated it into my match RP, because I've always tried to write fully fleshed out characters who exist beyond the camera, and everything that happens in the in-between times informs what happens on camera. I couldn't care less if anyone but me reads it, but the fact that it exists means I can draw on it in the future. There you go. Anything you put down on paper is material for future use, both for you and your opponent. So that's a great point, Pete. Guys, thank you very much for answering this week's question of the week, whether on Discord or on the Twitter. Join us next week for another question of the week, and your comments could be read on the show. And also, buy Pete's book.
Hey, this is Jay, the Handler of Perfection, and you're listening to the Efed Podcast.
Welcome to the Efed Podcast Spotlight segment. This is a segment where we highlight a Fed that's out there, we check out the website, review some of the things we see aesthetically, and check out some of the roster as well. And this week, the Efed Podcast Spotlight is on Blood and Nations Promotions. You can find them at bloodandnation.weebly.com or on Twitter at PromotionsN. Blood and Nations Promotions has a roster of about 20 superstars. They are still taking applications as everyone doesn't work every show, so there's plenty of space to grow new characters or revive old ones if you'd like. They currently have 3 active championships, the World Blood title, the 24/7 title, and the television title. They're all currently active. Some of the wrestlers on the roster, we see G.A. Madness Howard, Ya Girl Q, El Diablo Blanco, Chris Spade, Aaron Blue, Keg, Zod, Heather Hayes, Olivia Areno, and Blackbeard. Oh, my good buddy Blackbeard. one of the guys I've known longer than anyone in this game. How does the Fed operate? Well, the Fed operates via a program bot. This is completely different, you guys. I really dig the concept. Check this out. It's AI in layman's terms. They have no control over the outcomes of the matches. What we do is write the results or the angles based off of the outcomes of the match, which creates a story. The AI is written with almost 50 to 100 lines of code, and the code creates variations and patterns in the results that makes it completely unbiased while presenting the perception that a human is writing the results. The goal was to remove the Fed head and place in a system of where staff are responding to outcomes that are without the usual biases that Feds face on a daily basis. B.A.N's dialogue system has roughly 50 responses, with 20% being open-ended. I studied many eFedders' tweets to design a tone and likeness of that of a robot, but one that could also hold a conversation. She still has that bot feel, though, with her repeated tweets of the same response, but I think that's good. It reminds people that you're not actually speaking to a human on the other side, and that keeps the integrity of B.A.N at high levels to where people can't accuse us of lying about the results. As far as what kind of Fed it is, technically, I guess it's going to fall under an angle Fed, as it is an AI Fed. The shows, as often as they are, they used to be daily and house shows with TV shows, but now they're running shows once a week with the whole COVID situation. Once everything returns to normal, they will also be going back to daily shows and results. The pay-per-views are done once a month, with the latest being Troubled Waters, which is now available over on B.A.N's website. The rules are very, very few over at B.A.N. Other than the regular hype for the matches, they do ask if there's an angle that you want your character in to talk to SE directly or Ricky Stanton, who's running the operation over there. And that's about as much influence as you can have over the storyline, because everything else is not predetermined. If people want to, they can send in segs and hype their careers in B.A.N, and they can send in segments with 500-word limits, or obviously you can tweet about the results and create storylines over Twitter. The website itself is fairly simple, with a banner up top and a drop-down menu that gives you all the links you need. The homepage also shows all of the tweets made by the @PromotionsN account. The drop-down menu does give you links to the roster page, the About page, the Join page, and results, including the pay-per-view that just went down. While the website is lacking on a graphical side, it is my understanding that the Fed is based mostly on Twitter, with the website acting more as an additional resource or reference, almost the way the forums would work on a normal eFed. The results are posted via tweet sometimes, and sometimes they are in long form like the pay-per-view. You can find out more at bloodandnations.weebly.com. As far as my final thoughts on this one goes, B.A.N is an awesome concept. I love the idea of taking the Fed head out of the game and playing more like you would a computer game or something along those lines. Then you take whatever happens, and it's your job to fill in the story around the results. It's a great concept, something brand new to me and to e-wrestling, I think, and I think it's not going to be long before this is what we're moving towards in the future of e-fedding. If you ask me, you should definitely check out the great concept Fed. This will be the future of e-fedding as we know it, and I'm really into the idea of B.A.N. Check them out on Twitter @PromotionsN or online, bloodandnation.weebly.com. And not to mention, but our good friend over there, Ricky Stanton, he's been a supporter of the eFed podcast from the very beginning, plugging it on his own podcasts. So we want to shout out to our good buddy, Ricky Stanton. Appreciate him holding it down for us, both on Twitter and on his podcast. And another reason you guys should definitely check out this Fed is because he's running the ship, as far as I know. And he's the man. bloodandnation.weebly.com. Hey everybody, it's Mikey. No, we're not back to the show just yet. First, I want to tell you about my Patreon. Now I know what you're thinking, oh no, am I going to have to pay for the podcast? No. The answer is emphatically no. The show has been and forever will be free. No, Brunk, you will not have to pay for the podcast. However, we have been asked by a handful of people how they can help support the show. And we've also been asked, mostly by Fuzz, why we didn't have a Patreon yet. And I quote, "You stupid I can't believe you don't have a Patreon. I will hurt you if you don't take my money now." End quote. That was Fuzz. He's a scary dude. So with that in mind, you can find us at patreon.com/efedpodcast. Contributions start as low as $3 a month. Thank you very much for your consideration. Please get Fuzz off our backs. All right, guys, this week on the show, we're joined by one of the more well-known and well-liked long-term players in the game, a man who's been around many circles in the game, and it seems like every Fed I go into, they know him too. He's also one of the guys who's better known for doing Efed podcasting way before I was doing it and before it was cool. I guess he made it cool. This is Mr. Ford. He is the handler of Jack Harmen and the D. How you doing, Ford?
Hi, Mikey. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invite. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on, buddy. Really appreciate you taking the time. And we've been writing together now for a couple years.
Yeah, and I will say I never made Efed podcasting cool. I just did it for a while. But yeah, you've been doing a stellar job here. We've been writers together for 5-6 years now, so it was good to see this blossom from infancy to what it's become. So congrats, man.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. And basically all I did was just steal your guys' ideas and then just make it a recorded show instead of live.
I mean, it's a lot easier to quality control a recorded show than a live show. I will say that. We've had some stinkers in the past, so I think you got the good idea. You got the smart idea. We got the dumb idea.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's start at the very beginning, Tom. How did you get into professional wrestling? How did you find pro wrestling?
How did I get into wrestling? I was probably about 10 years old. My best friend growing up had been telling me I should be watching wrestling for about a year or two. It was April 1994 because I was basically hanging out with my grandparents. They ran a bowling alley, and I was stuck in the little office off to the side of the bowling alley where people work and, where they come by to reset the pins. And I was just watching on this maybe 10-inch TV CRT monitor the commercial for WrestleMania 10 over and over. So I told my dad, hey, can we use your cheater box to record it? And then I recorded it and I started watching wrestling, and I haven't really ever stopped. I mean, I've paused and I've fallen out of love with it, but I always fall back in. So
yeah. And how old were you then?
That would have been 1994.
Okay.
Would have
10
been
years old. There you go. That's a great age to fall in love with wrestling.
A little older than most, I think. A lot of my peers were, 6 or 5 or something. They saw the Hogan days. So that was all, in the past for me.
That's great. And so who were your favorites right off the bat?
Oh, I mean, I was heartbroken when Tatanka turned heel at SummerSlam 93. So I
always love when it's those obscure guys. That's always my favorite.
I called the WWE hotline at the 93 King of the Ring and was like, Tatanka's going to win. Yep, he's going to do it. I know it. I'm not going to get in trouble.
That's amazing. And did you?
Oh, yeah, I definitely got grounded for like a week or two. So
how much did that phone call cost?
Probably about $8 to $12, but back then $8 to $12 was probably around $40. So
yeah, it was a little bit more than now, right?
Inflation and all that. Never did that again, I'll say that.
So Tatanka was your favorite in the beginning. Who else?
I mean, I was always a small kid growing up, so 1-2-3 Kid was definitely someone who I gravitated towards. And then when Tatanka broke my heart, and then eventually, I think the '95 Rumble when Shawn Michaels really caught my eye. I was like, oh, this guy's fucking awesome. Partially because, his whole shtick, he was doing the bad guy thing with Sid as manager. But also just because my dad was like, see, wrestling's fake. Of course, the good guy's going to win. He's going to throw the bad guy out right here at the end of the Royal Rumble in '95. And he did that, but Michaels skinned cat, came back in, threw Bulldog out, and ever since then, I've loved Shawn Michaels. So
there you go. Brian will be glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So who is that? Your Mount Rushmore then? Tatanka, 1-2-3 Kid, Shawn Michaels.
Tatanka's definitely my boy. I'll say if you know OSW Review. But no. I mean, I guess Mount Rushmore. Obviously, I put Shawn Michaels up there. Ric Flair, obviously. Chris Jericho, I would consider nowadays. He's probably the more modern day version, And then you go back even further. I mean, there's guys like Hogan and Bret Hart. that I can't appreciate nearly as much as others do. It's like Harley Race and Luthez and all those people. Like, I never watched Luthez. Like, I've never seen a Luthez match, but I say his name in every match I write. So it's like, he left a lasting impact. So
Yeah, clearly.
Gordy Guerrero, I never saw anything he did, but
The Gordy Guerrero special is a thing.
Exactly.
So how did you find e-wrestling then?
Same friend, actually. He started running a league in 1996 through AOL, through email, and he'd been trying to get me into it for ages, and I just was not allowed on the internet. I could go on Prodigy to look up football statistics for a school project, but that's about the extent of my internet usage at the time. When 98 came around, I was allowed to use Hotmail with my mom's email account. So I signed up for a bunch of eFeds, and she was getting 40 messages a day, and she's like, okay, you're going to need your own email account now. So yeah, I joined in 98. I tried to join in 97, didn't work out, but I joined in 98. I joined with High Flyer, and I joined with Shawn Michaels and the Outsiders, and I just made them DX. So High Flyer was just the 1, 2, 3 kid part.
There you go. So it was a half real Fed, half fake Fed.
Yeah, I mean, primarily, like, main characters were, like, real, but everybody, like, kind of, like, to try and handle other people who are real, like, actual characters. Like I handled High Flyer, but I had the other real characters, but someone else would handle a guy like Edward Glide, and then he'd have, like, I don't know, like Typhoon or something. I don't fucking know. It's been 20 plus years. But yeah, so it was kind of run like that. So it was kind of just experimental.
Do you remember your next Fed after that one? And obviously you started with the same character basically you're running now.
I mean, he's gone through a lot of changes, but yeah, he's
sure. Obviously, yeah,
person,
absolutely.
so.
Same. Yeah, that's crazy because before I got to Mikey, I've been 6 or 7 different guys.
I mean, I will say that I have a treasure trove of characters that have barely seen the light of day that would probably make you think that I'm Seth.
The man of 1,000 characters, yes.
Pretty much, but he actually handles them, at least for an arc at a time. I just create them and throw them on a shelf. So
yeah.
But yeah, I've handled High Flyer since January of 98. I don't know why I kept him around. I just kept writing with him, and he stuck. And after a year or two, I got really attached. So I'm not going to get rid of him. Yeah, but all my other characters that I wrote way back when, they're all either dead or retired or doing something weird, or they fell into a stadium fire, or I don't know what the hell. You know how e-wrestling is if you're listening.
I know, this. Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. So kind of walk us through your journey then with Jack Harmen and High Flyer. Obviously he started as High Flyer. What was the inspiration? Just the 1, 2, 3 kid?
1, 2, 3 kid, a little bit of Shawn Michaels. I'd say a lot of Chris Jericho and Rey Mysterio Jr. for the ring work at the time.
Okay.
I just wanted to be really super agile and be able to, like, kind of Undertaker walk on the ropes. Beyond that, he was just kind of like a petulant child, which he still is today. So even though he's 45, something that he probably has in common with me.
One of those character traits turned up to 11.
Yeah. I don't know. I just kept on writing him forever. And it's one of those things, like, his dad is a character I wrote when I was 8. Like, I wrote a book about a time traveling detective. And that's Jack Harmen's dad. So, and it's, I mean, that's just, it's the story of that family, and I just going to keep writing it. And his son is currently doing stuff in the business now. He's over at defiancewrestling.com, which is the place where I run. And Brian, your fine engineer, actually runs it. So.
Yes, defiancewrestling.com. Check it out if you're looking for a great angle fed. We're going to drop that about 40 times in this interview.
Yeah, but I'm also going to say a bunch of other 3-letter initials in a row that you probably don't remember, or if you do, you're going to be like, oh, wow, I remember that from 20 years ago.
Well, there you go. Where did High Flyer go after your first Fed?
Well, so back in 98 in email Feds, and my role plays were maybe a paragraph to 2 paragraphs.
Yeah. I'm going to beat you this Sunday in Texas.
Exactly. Run-on sentences. I don't know how to spell up. So I basically joined like 6 or 7 feds when I first started e-fedding because I just couldn't get enough of it. And I, wrote the same in all of them because that's what the talent pool was at the time. They were very much beginner feds. They were just people having shits and giggles.
Yep.
So yeah, I did email feds for about a year. I wound up helping run the place that I started at. And then I started helping run another fed that I was in that I joined. It called the GWA Grand Wrestling Alliance with a couple of people I'm still friends with now on the Facebook.
Wow.
And then I eventually found there was this guy, Edward Glide. I mentioned his character earlier. He was the first match that Flyer ever had. He beat me like 4 times in a row. I never beat him. But he said that there's a really good competition. If you're bored, you should check out this place called the IWO, which at the time was FWLnet.com. It was run by a guy who's gone on to do a lot of work in multimedia, and he had one of the top community sites back in the late 90s. He was getting millions of people traffic to his site every day. I wound up applying. I forgot that I did. A month later, I awakened to about 50 emails flooding my inbox that are, we used to call them 10 kilobytes, which is just the, how big the file size is. We weren't even doing word counts back then. We were just like, yeah, this is a 16 kilobyte role play. I'm killing it right now. But yeah, so I joined the IWO, which eventually became, it was, IWO-online.com, run with FWLnet. They were part of TNM7 back in the day and blah, blah, blah. Eventually, like I have a pattern of doing, if I'm in a place long enough, I wound up starting to help run the place. And I ran this place until 2003. In 2002, there was a falling out between the staff. Everybody was just kind of like, okay, we're done. We're too old for this shit. And I decided to keep it going for another year. Eventually, I just... It was an interesting thing at the time. I had changed it into an indie fed, and we were running 1 show a month, and we were doing like DVDs. You could order the DVD and see what happened a week ago. You could order like web shows online. So I was trying to do stuff like that really early back then. But in the end, it didn't pan out, and the place, which was probably around for about 10 years in total, like shut down in 2003 for good. About that time is when I joined the FWO, which some people may know. Travis B.A.N used to run the place.
Yep.
Had some fantastic pictures and even better writing. A ton of great characters and people I've worked with, and I'm still working with people today. Like I mentioned earlier, Seth was in there, Linz was there. Now over there at High Octane Wrestling, HOWrestling.com, you got guys like Deacon, you got Mariella Jade. I don't know how to pronounce names, but Eli Flair. All those people came from FWO or from FWrestling.com, which I'm going to plug again. Chad Merritt, thank you for paying for Blog Talk Radio for 5 years. We only used it for 2. But so yeah, I'm rambling. But I went to the FWO. We did that for a while. FWO shut down eventually. I wound up going to FW Central and Prime and PTC. I had a cup of coffee for a couple of years, and Dusty Spike Saunders is the MPW.com, which I believe they're coming back any minute now, or they might even be back up to running shows, but you should definitely check them out. They're one of the longest running feds currently out there. Yeah, and then I've just been hanging around FWrestling.com for ages until I joined Defiance in 2014 for the first time. Came back in 2016, I think, maybe 2017, and I've been there since. With handling with Billy, who handles Elise Aries. We're the Pop Culture Phenoms, and we just like to have a lot of fun and fuck with people.
So much fun, yeah.
I think I like the D more than I like High Flyer now. It's just one of those things. Well, at least the D and Blind, like the combination of those three together. Like now that they're back together, it just feels like a warm blanket.
You just get to get out a different side of your personality. It's great though. Love that character. Love the D. So where did the D begin? We talked, you kind of touched on Jack Harmen, and we'll go back. But where did the D pop up for the first time?
The D was Okay, so I was naming characters based off the songs. So Klein was named Josh Southtown Klein after the song Southtown by P.O.D.
Okay.
Mind you, this was 1998.
Yep.
So they are as old as Jack Harmen is. The D, it was Derek Fly Guy Edwards, because obviously he's pretty fly.
For a white guy.
Pretty much. And they were basically just a 3-count ripoff. Like, Klein was much smaller than he is now. And I just kind of was messing around with them. Eventually, it became an inside joke. There was this, I don't know, I think my best friend growing up, and we're still good friends now, we have all these strange jokes, especially when inebriation is involved. And we had this thing where you can, if you have food, you can have a drink with it. But if you have drink, you can have drink by itself. But if you have food, you have to have the drink. So we had a tag team where only the drink could do singles, and drink was Derek, the D. And Klein was food, so Klein could only wrestle in tag matches, and that's kind of something I kind of kept with him eventually, like so that Klein didn't wrestle anymore and the D kept doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It was just one of those weird things. It probably makes no sense to anyone, except for the one person who's not going to listen to this radio show. But that's the origins. I mean, you can't really explain the motivations behind a 17-year-old brain besides this sounds fun.
Well, how did you get from the full name down to the D?
I'm pretty much doing what the WWE does with everybody and just shortening names.
You just shortened it.
First it was Derek Edwards, and then it was just Edwards, and then it was Ed, and then it became the D.
There you go. Evolution.
Pretty much.
I like it. So you mentioned that you ended up taking over or staffing a lot of feds that you were part of. Have you ever opened your own fed?
Like from scratch?
Yeah.
I've reopened feds from half scratch. I guess you could say in 1999 I ran one fed on GeoCities that lasted a show that had the word extreme in it. I don't know if that would be counted as running a fed from scratch, but that's the closest I think I got. I just inherited the people's dreams. So
I bet you it made a top 100 list somewhere.
It was probably on FWL Net's top 100 list. Probably rigged up the votes. I don't know. But yeah, no, never from scratch. I've had concepts and ideas brewing and percolating, but like if I ran a fed, it wouldn't run like a normal fed. It would run, oh yeah, we're going to do 20 episodes this year and we're going to plot them all out and then we'll release them like a TV show would release on Netflix. Like you could binge the entire 20 episodes. Check them out.
Oh, wow. There you go.
You know,
it'd be different.
Yeah. And then we come back the next year with the cast of characters, and that way people could spend, 6 to 8 months writing something and then get to see it released publicly. And, it might be hard to keep people engaged during the off months, at least from a fan perspective. But if we're just looking for the best story you can tell, releasing something complete, you can't do any better than that with the editorial process. And I don't know, but whatever, that's what I would do.
And even with the long-term release, maybe you do want the kind of dull off season so you can be like, hey, we're back,
Yeah, pretty much.
The big news announcement. I like it.
Yeah.
So where did Klein come from? He just same place as the D? They came in together just to form your trio?
Yeah, I mean, the D and Klein, they were their
own separate
tag team. They were the disposable heroes. One was food, one was drink. They were basically just they were just basically my 3-count Hardy Boy ripoffs, except for I made Klein a little larger, so he was kind of Taz-like, so he could do some power. And then I just, over time, I increased Klein's size slightly, as one might do when they retrofit someone's age in this game. The more places he joined, the bigger he got, because I just found it funny that this big guy, like Brock Lesnar style, could do the shooting star press that Brock does. And they could throw people around and be really friendly about it.
He is very friendly.
Yeah.
So when did Klein get the box? And explain to people who don't know Klein what I mean by the box.
All right, so Klein is the manager of the Pop Culture Phenoms. He used to be a wrestler, but the backstory is that he injured a student, crippled him, and he didn't want to get to the ring ever again. but the D needed a partner. He needed an entourage, so Klein came with him to Defiance. Klein and the D, they were a tag team called the Disposable Heroes in Legacy of Champions, which is a Fed ran by Dan McDevitt. Ran in 2005, I think, first. It ran till 2011, and then it came back in 2012 for 2 or 3 years. Linz, myself, Seth, were all in there handling.
That's where the Harmen poser came from, right?
Hal is currently using. That's from Dan McDevitt over at I don't know what the website is anymore. It's either Legacy of Champions.com or LOC Wrestling or .com, one of those places. I think the site's still up with most of the archives, but so that place was around for 15 years plus, and Dan's always willing to try and write and get that back up off the ground. I'm excited to see whenever Dan gets the motivation and the support behind him to do so. But back then in 2007, I think I was in between feds. I was bored. I just figured I'd handle a tag team, and I decided that Klein would now be only called Klein. Before he was, had a full name, Josh Klein. And I figured that he would just be incredibly scared of technology and people taking his picture. So he would have this gigantic cardboard box he'd carry around. And whenever it got too much for him, he'd go inside it, like put it over top of himself. And then when I came to Defiance, instead of having this big ass box that he had to look around where you could see his face, I figured I'd just make the box into a mask because I've never seen that. Came up with this concept where there were all these like fasten screws and what have you, so that it would like remain functional. Like I came up with prototypes in my head. I swear. And I just.
Where's the sketches? We need the we need the design.
What are you asking me to do? I'm not graphically talented.
Okay.
I mean, that's why we have Billy do our graphics.
Fair enough.
Brian do our graphics.
That's exactly why.
Yeah, so Klein is just a scared guy who wants to hug everybody and wears a box on his head because he thinks cameras steal your soul. So.
And now he wears the box on his head anytime he's in the arena, basically.
We've kind of dabbled with him taking the box off in Defiance. Like, he did take it off, and he's been showing more personality and actually talking. But he was in Defiance from 2016 on, and I think he spoke his first words last year. So it's a long joke. It's one of those things you keep going, and the more you do with it, the more little touches you add, like him putting a ref shirt on, pretending he's a referee, things like that. I don't know. Just adds to the fun. So
when he fights with Carly Ferreira every night,
because she counted just a little bit too slower, a little slower than him, or a little faster than him. Who knows?
Yeah. She kicks him out, and then he tries to kick her out. It's exactly. So good. Such great stuff. Love Klein. So that kind of covers the trio. Is there other characters you want to touch on? I mean, you're gonna be asked about some, I think, in the questions, but not many specific ones.
That's fair.
So why don't you hit us with some of the closet characters, so to speak?
I mean, I'd say there's 3 other semi-significant, if you want to even call them that, characters, I'd say. Okay. One is Eddie Chino, who had a long career in the Asylum. He was a boxer in an underground UFC sort of federation back in the early 2000s, run by Joe Campbell.
Okay.
Known for its grittiness, reality, more like this was the HBO of Efeds, where you see actual rape and things like that. I don't know if I would necessarily condone that sort of writing and such, but super violent, super Sopranos-esque. It's run by the mob. Yeah. You're in a criminal underworld. You're either going to be, your life is either going to be threatened all the time, or you're going to be threatening lives, things like that. Again, he was kind of like the early version of Klein, happy-go-lucky. He was just a stoner who just, trusted whoever he talked to instantly. And in a place like that, it was bad for him. He definitely had some bad times. I'll say that. Got shot in the face, things like that. So,
just some small things.
This is the same place if you talk to Pete, handler of Eli Flair and MJF, where he had Chris Credible, where he kept surviving even though his Des Aragon killed people every show that he was on. This was a place where death was commonplace, especially towards the later years. I just bring him up because I have this desktop photo that Joe made of him. That's just a silhouette of him in a cape with a long joint out of his mouth, and he just looks like Batman, and it just has the word Batmang. So Yeah.
That's pretty good.
The only other two significant, Noah Hansen, who was this petulant 18-year-old kid who just felt entitled. He was kind of the model of the millennial generation, I guess. He was in Action Wrestling, which is ran by Roland, who's a handler in Defiance Wrestling, Gage Blackwood. He did LLB back in Action and the Squared Circle days. He was over there, and he wound up in Asylum, and he fell from a roof during some sort of crossover event, and he fell into fire, and I've never used him again, so maybe he's dead, maybe he's alive, I don't know, whatever. And the only other person I think with significance is the lackey to Mega Job. If you don't know Mike Renner, he is my spirit animal. Mega Job is El Janito, the Mexican stereotype, along with Beef the Slightly Annoyed, and a midget named Steve. So I would do these comedy segments with him, along with a character named Eddie Scott Poser, who believed because someone called him a royal ass, he looked up his history, and apparently he is a descendant of Polish royalty. So now he thinks he's the king of Poland, and goes around ordering people around. It doesn't end well for him. Yeah, those are significant ones. Those are ones that I've handled for more than a year, or throughout. Like Poser and Chino, they've been around since 2000. So anything else has been, very, very small, or they've been NPCs or, people in Brazen, things like that. When I say Brazen, that is the feeder fed to DefianceWrestling.com. Go check it out.
Over at DefianceWrestling.com if you're looking for a great angle fed.
If you want to try and take the belt off this guy.
Oh, yeah. Come get it.
Spoilers. I assume that this drops after.
Yeah, it's already been done.
Yeah, well, no, I know that you've already won the championship. I assume that this will not drop after you lose the championship, whenever that may be.
I will never lose the championship, my good sir.
Oh, those some cocky words. Bring it on. Everybody out there, you hear him. He's saying he can beat you.
DefianceWrestling.com. All right, Tom. Well, we got some questions from the crowd. Are you ready for those?
Yeah, but where's the crowd? I want to stay away from them because of, I don't want to touch them.
They're all at least 6 feet away from you, so we're good there.
Good. Thank you.
Up first in the Discord, we got Warren Fitz 45. He wants to know, what's the reason you've stayed in the game so long?
That's a good question. I asked myself that a lot. I think it's just I like to write, and I want to keep myself sharp. I don't know if I actually am anymore. I don't think I'm really that great anymore, but it's something that keeps me going and keeps me writing. And I do enjoy writing, especially when you get that moment when you're working with someone and you just have this hilarity that you burst out laughing with each other, or you have this dramatic moment that really fulfills a story you've been working or setting up for months. Like, those are some really fulfilling moments and emotions that you can get in this hobby. And I guess I chase the high. I chase the dragon. What can I say?
Yeah, no doubt. That's a great answer. At Percival Conrad Prince, how many bitches want the D?
You gotta ask the D that, but he's gonna say everybody. So, although he might not want some bitches though, because there's a reason why they call him that.
Everybody wants the D. At Brock, it's been over 20 years. What was the inside scoop on IWO/FWL.net sale to Snowball?
I don't think it was ever actually a sale. It was more an affiliation. Like, it was an advertising revenue stream that was set up by the owner of the IWO, where he would, plug Snowball, they'd plug him. As far as I know, it wasn't a sale because I was given it a year and a half later, and it's still technically mine, I think. Like, if I wanted to open FWLnet.com, I'd have to find the website, but as far as I know, it's mine. So
that's the inside scoop. There you go, Brock.
Yeah, there's not really much of an inside scoop. Snowball eventually was bought by IGN, so that's why I say that one of my first jobs was with IGN, because technically we were the first ever IGN affiliated Efed. So
his second question is, what are your personal top 5 feds that you've been a part of in e-wrestling? What made them special?
I mean, it's hard to really quantify that, but I'd say what made them special would be the friendships I've developed in those feds. So the ones that really stand out would be IWO back in the day, FWO after that, Prime after that, NFW, and then LOC or Defiance with a little bit of Hal maybe now, but it's still a little early for me to really figure out where that would fit in on the list, if you will, because it's still ongoing. But
Sure.
I think those are
Still
the
new.
ones that really
Yep.
stand out. The only thing I'd give is a special kudos to Cats and NFW. They kept me in the hobby when I hadn't one foot out the door. So without him, I probably wouldn't still be writing. So yeah, thank you, man. I don't think he's ever going to hear this, but fuck it, thank him.
Everybody worldwide will hear this. I'm
Yes.
positive.
We're gonna put it on CNN. I mean, yeah, it's as rambly as the press conferences are. So
There you go. Perfect. All right. Up next is at Judge Megan. She wants to know, do you prefer to play babyface or heel in this game, and why?
I mean, usually that's a good question. It's hard to really determine. I'd say overall, I like playing babyface more than heel, but then I'll play babyface for too long of a time, and then I'll really enjoy playing heel for like 3 months, and I'll be like, okay, when am I going to turn back? What are we doing now? Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just put out there. It's hard to be a good babyface in this game, and I think you're one of them.
I just think it's easier because, like you said, nobody really knows how to write a babyface. So if you can even get in the ballpark, you're going to shine out compared to others. Yeah.
Golden. Yeah.
I mean, I remember there were feds that I wanted to join. I remember Jolt Wrestling back in the day, run by Zobo and Aaron the Relentless, Aaron Okowski. He was like, yeah, we are loaded. There's no way we can get you in. I was like, well, I'm a babyface. And he's like, oh, okay, actually we can get you in like next week. So, it's one of those things. If you're seeing doors close on you, try being a good babyface and you'll see a bunch of them open. So.
No doubt. Yeah, it's very much needed in this game because everybody wants to be a cool heel.
I like to be the chicken shit heel. So, it's more fun.
Same. Yeah. At Rosseron is up next. Ross in Defiance. How has your writing evolved from when you first started role-playing to now?
If you're asking till now, I'd say it's devolved in the last 10 years, but
let's say overall.
I mean, overall, it's been a roller coaster, but it's definitely improved tenfold. My grasp of the English language and diction in general has improved. Hosting a podcast like Efed Gorillas for as long as I did really helped me just with talking to people in my day-to-day life. So, I mean, even when I'm doing like a technical brief at work or whatever, I've noticed that my writing skills are significantly better than most. I don't know. In my opinion, I guess. But
sure.
So I don't have the problem of how do I phrase this? What do I do? What do I say? Nearly as much as other people may. Overall, it's changed and morphed from I did scripts, I've done novel, went back to script, I've done screenplay formats. I think right now I don't have patience for the bullshit, and I don't want to get into descriptions and metaphors. I just want to have a character talk and shout things at a wall. and that worked really great in F wrestling because that's all they did was that 1980s. There's a flag behind you. You got 2 minutes, go. And I love those sort of things. And
yeah,
I don't know what stories I want to tell with my characters anymore because I've told most of the stories with the character. He's just kind of treading water right now. He's just kind of he's fighting people. I think motivation is the main thing for characters and for writers that needs to be looked at. But I will say that my meandering skills have improved greatly. If that's an answer to the question at all.
All right. At TEFP producer, that's our good buddy Brian. What Fed should everyone join, and why is it DefianceWrestling.com?
Well, if it wasn't that question, I was going to say no comment. But yes, it's DefianceWrestling.com, and you should have joined yesterday.
Yeah, he's a little shady, that Brian.
Well, yeah, but you got me to balance it out. So I'm the light, he's the dark. It all works out. It's a yin and yang balance.
There you go.
You're obviously the light. You're the face of the Efed podcast. He is the dark dungeon of the Efed podcast.
He is. He's not shown. We don't put his picture up.
I'm surprised you even mentioned him by name. I feel like if we're saying too much, he might show up. So
he's gonna cut all of this out.
Love you, Brian.
Love you, Brian. At Seth is Burns is up next. It says, who is your favorite side character?
Oh, definitely Klein. I'd say he's a side character. He hasn't really had any main stories by himself. Without a doubt, Klein is my favorite side character of my own.
He's my favorite of yours too.
If you're asking about side character that I didn't handle, I'm gonna say Mike Renner, and I'm gonna go Steve, because how can you not like a small little midget who is the voice of reason but can only say one word in a shouting voice? Like, there's nothing to not like about that.
That sounds pretty good. His second question is, who's your favorite Seth character?
I mean, there's something to be said for your first love, if you will, and I mean, Sonny Silver's that for me, for Seth. But I mean, like, he's got a shit ton of really good characters. Jeremy Ryan was really cooking in LSC.
He's got a shit ton of characters.
Well, yeah, I'm specifying he has a shit ton of good characters too, though. So there's a shit ton of his characters that, maybe he even says that he's never even worked with. But I mean, even like Team Haas, and I do love that he's kept Capital Punishment alive with Sean Williams passing away a year and a half ago. He was I've known him for 20 years and have his character live on as the Enforcer, Brazen, and part of Team Haas. I love that. And of course, obviously, the most recent Fist of Defiance before you, Oscar Burns. I mean, how can you not like a Kiwi like that?
Great babyface.
If you're talking about someone who can write a babyface character, Seth is it. I'm a distant second. So, and maybe even like a distant 12th. I don't know. I'm sure there's a bunch of other people out there who do it better than me, but I think Seth is number one right now. So that's just me.
There you go.
Yeah.
Favorite one?
Enjoy your moment of flattery. It'll be long until there's another.
Up next is Billy and the Frappe.
No.
He wants to know F, Marry, Kill, Elise Aries, Vivica J. Valentine, and O-Face.
I mean, it's conventionally speaking, there's an answer to this that's correct, but I guess for me, I would probably kill O-Face. I'd marry Elise, even though it's the worst decision ever, and I'd fuck BJF, BJV. I mean, marrying Elise is the worst idea anyone could ever
do.
The
worst
but,
decision.
I'm going to do it because I want to see what he says.
She would run your life.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes you need that if you don't want to make decisions.
Oh, that's awesome. Those were all from the Discord. Now we're going to jump over to the Twitter questions. We got a few there as well. Up first is at the Maritime Poppy with a 1 for an I. Relative to Efeds, what has changed for you in the past 30 to 60 days as a direct result of the coronavirus? Has there been a need to heavily adapt to these changes in your life?
I mean, it's going to be one of those things where we're all going to be talking about this for years now. In my opinion, I mean, everything's changed for people. Like, I've been stuck in my house for 2 months now or whatever, at least a month. Mm-hmm. I forget exactly when the stay-at-home order from Gavin Newsom in California came out, but I've gone out of my house 5 times, and 4 of those were for groceries, and 1 was for some other necessary product.
Other groceries.
Other type of groceries. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we're just going to be having to deal with this moving ahead. There's not it's not going to be over unless there's a vaccine. Like, we're just all going to be having to stay so far away from each other, which for an introvert like me, it's great, but even I'm getting a little stir crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, beyond that, it made me buy a desk. That's a good thing.
What about relative to Efeds?
Relative to Efeds, I mean, there is this kind of cloud of like, why are we doing this? Like, I don't know, maybe I could make a vaccine. If I spent 20 years studying science instead of writing, could I have made a vaccine that prevented this? But it's another good distraction to have during these crazy, wild pandemic times that, I mean, it's unprecedented in my lifetime. I didn't expect something like this to happen. I don't know about yourself.
Yeah. No, not at all. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. And I've been speaking to my parents. I've been speaking to the last generation, and they're telling me the same thing. They've never seen anything like this. It's wild.
I mean, if you look back at your kindergarten, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's not going to be sequestered in your house because of a virus. So it's undescribable how strange this is, and it's the new norm. So we got to get used to it.
At User Poets is up next. Our good friend Pete. Which era of Jack Harmen is your favorite and why?
I mean, I guess the NFW era for now. Getting to play a character who was playing 4 different types of personalities, and then getting yelled at that he can't be anyone but himself, and then he finds a tag team with Nova, and they just, smoke a lot of weed and never take the belts off. I don't know. I just that was really fun, especially the time with Chris, riding with Chris as part of Superfly Express. Having the tag belts and, refusing to take them off through airport security. Those were good moments.
All right. Pete's question number 2. Which of your side characters do you wish you'd done more with?
I guess Noah Hawkins maybe, but I felt like his end was appropriate way back when. I mean, you don't come back from a dumpster fire. It would have been nice to do some more work with Eddie Chino back when the asylum was closing, maybe wrap his story up. But I mean, I would have said Klein and the D, but since we've been in Defiance, I've been able to really flesh them out and have some fun with them. Beyond that, there's maybe a couple characters I created in, WWF No Mercy 64 or whatever that I never brought to Efed, but I'm not going to go around handling dude hate. Or the Negro Meanie. So
that Punisher is still waiting for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Andrew Martin is a badass. So
up next is at High Spot Hero, and he wants to know, do you know the way?
Can you show me the way? I can't do the voice, but I'm not a hedgehog, so sorry. Go back to YouTube.
JFK_Kendricks wants to know, what's your favorite seg moment?
I think it's the award ceremony. I mean, that whole bit and the ramp up and the drama and how you guys kept on giving awards to yourselves, and we were kind of building this tension between the two. Yeah,
it was fun stuff.
I mean, and it was the start of the whole angle between the 4 of us. For the tag belts. I think the only other an honorable mention I would do is when we had the match itself, and there was the moment where we all fell down to the mat pretending we got hit by a chair like Eddie Guerrero.
Yeah, threw one up in the air.
Yeah. And Carlo was just like, I don't know what to do with this.
What the fuck? Yeah.
I think that was one of my favorite moments.
That's awesome. My favorite is when Mikey and Kendricks built the wall, and Klein and BCP were on the outside of the wall in the end.
Yeah, that's fair. And that was early on, wasn't it?
I don't know. Yeah, it was fun though. I loved our time in SEG. For those of you out there who don't know, SEG was the Sports Entertainment Guild. Much like the Screen Actors Guild, we had a group of actors and wrestlers. It was interesting times. And whatever Kendricks is, he's a English strippy addicted bloke.
Yeah, but basically a bunch of entertainers in, NWA, 1980s, Mid-South, yeah.
Some of my favorite times in e-wrestling is when I can get into a doc with my good buddy Stevie and write comedy stuff. But when the 4 of us, me, Stevie, Billy, and yourself got into a doc, it was insane what we could do. It's just hilarious.
We just wrote for pages, and basically our characters were just starstruck by Mikey Unlikely, this B-movie actor, and our characters are the Tommy Wiseau of professional wrestling. It was a perfect powder cake of fun.
It was so
I
much.
think the only thing it could have been better was if we had Frank Hollywood, the Hollywood stuntman, and Mikey could just order him around to do all his stunts for him.
Oh, that would have been great.
The only thing that would have made it better. You could have sent him out like the match is about to end, Mikey's about to lose, and Mikey just sends him in to take the fall. Things like
that. Kendrick's second question is, who came up with the nickname K-Cup? It's my favorite.
I don't know. I mean,
It was either Billy or yourself. It wasn't myself. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think we'd have to ask Billy. I'm going to give it to Billy, but Billy's going to give it to me. So I think that's going to be a question lost to the annals of time. Yeah.
That's a great nickname for Kendrick's K-Cup.
Yeah, it is. It's perfect. For a second there, I thought that was Klein's nickname now too, but
that can
Klein
be.
Is more K-Bowl.
There
He's
you
more
go.
K-Bowl.
Capable. Yeah, something.
Yeah, something like that. No, but I really don't know.
Up next, we got at C Farthington. He wants to know, what is your favorite EFG memory?
I'm not sure who this is. There was that one time where Colin fell asleep while hosting a podcast for us, but I mean, I don't want to say that right now.
He did ask if your favorite time was the time that you got in Pete's book.
I mean, I think that's everybody's favorite time. I don't know. I think one of my favorite times that stick out to me is doing the Wheel of Fortune Efed theme related for the after party. I think that was really fun.
There you go.
Having a Wheel of Fortune puzzle of KFC kitchen in my kitchen. Those were really fun. And then, I mean, there were so many hours of podcasting. I don't remember any of it because, you know, I killed those brain cells apparently. But I do remember live drug deals. I do remember a person saying that their character died and trying to get sympathy cards. I remember the Ultra title fondly as well, and having Chad Merritt really back us. And I feel like that's when Efed Gorillas really came into its own, because back then FWrestling.com had a bigger presence, a pedigree that was unrivaled at the time, maybe. And I feel like having the tournament and aligning with them and doing a lot of shows really expanded our audience, got people out there listening to Efed Gorillas that maybe wouldn't, and got us to look at feds like, say, Defiance, that I would not have seen otherwise. So talking to Angry Justin and realizing he's not that angry, he's just kind of agitated. And as he's going through War Games from 2013, because War Games is a pain in the ass, and everybody who does War Games will tell you that, I'm sure.
Yes, it was the worst.
You know, just little things like that, you know, talking to people and just having that weekly conversation with Colin and Pete. It's good to have them back in a Fed with me so that I can talk to them and bug the crap out of them. I like to talk to Colin more. So, yeah.
Yeah, I realize now we didn't touch on Efed Gorillas very much. Talk about what Efed Gorillas was, what the concept was, and who was involved.
I mean, Efed Gorillas was originally run by Ernest Perina, who handles Pat Gordon Jr., Max Hopper. It was him and Jordan Snow, and I believe there was a third, but I feel bad. Was it Josh Curtis? Was he? He eventually was a host, but basically they just wanted to do a live podcast where people would talk about e-fedding. You'd have one guest, you talk about their fed, their characters, kind of like what you're doing now, except for the lines would be open and live to everybody listening. Mm-hmm. People could call in, they could ask questions live on there, they could add to the conversation, they could distract from the conversation. Yeah, and it ran for about 5 years. About 6 months in, I had been calling in towards the end of every episode. Just, you know, I guess I had like the Tom Ford 5-minute segment. It wasn't even called anything. I would just call in. And eventually I was just like, hey, Ernie, you need a co-host this week. I'll help you out. Hey, I know how to do this. Hey, do you mind if I run a second show? We'll focus on F Wrestling and the feds that I'm a part of. And we just kind of did that for a while. I went out sort of recruiting people. We got people like Pete, we got people like Justin, we got people like Linz and Colin. I'm not going to forget Colin, to come on and host the show with me. And they eventually did their own spin-offs, and the whole brand lasted for about 5 years. But it was fun. I got to talk to a lot of people I wouldn't have otherwise, and meet people I would not have had the opportunity to talk to without it. So
100%. I'm finding out the same right now.
Yeah, so. I do miss it a little bit, but it kept a little bit of a regimen, a little bit of a schedule going. But it's also, once it's gone, it's you look back on it fondly. So, you know, I'm sure just enjoy the moments you're doing this when you can.
Absolutely.
I know it's all busy and crazy, and you're like, what the hell? How am I going to do this? Brian, what is this audio? Do something with it.
Pretty much, yeah.
You just smile, and you'll know that in a year or two you'll be like, that was fun, if you remember.
There you go. And correct me if I'm wrong, you were also part of the EW after party or after hours or something?
We did the after party, which that was I kind of want to host a podcast, but I don't really want to host a podcast with the schedule. So whenever Efed Gorillas is doing a show and there's an overtime or there's, a bunch of nonsense to be had, we'd run a show on a different Mixler, kind of like an after hours, after club sort of thing. And that's where we did like the Wheel of Fortune. We did like Jackbox games and just, played games with people who were on the call for the previous episode of the Efed podcast. Not this Efed podcast, but
the Efed Gorillas podcast.
That can get very confusing if we go down that rabbit hole.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually where I met you for the first time, was on the EW after party. I was on a post UTA show and introduced to you and Linz and a couple other people for the first time. So it's crazy how this whole world is and how small it is, and how now we've been handling together for over 3 or 4 years now and gotten to know each other pretty well, and even met last year in LA.
That was only last year. Man, time flies.
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And in that time, you've actually ran UTA. So you went from just being a handler to meeting me to eventually running the place to, I think, Halcom is bringing that back, isn't he? WrestleUTA.com?
No, it didn't work out.
Well, he'll bring it back at some point when it does work out.
There you go.
He's Halcom. He'll make it work when he wants it to.
Good, so. That's it. So, well, very good. Tom, before we go, I want to give you a minute. Is there anything else you want to shout out? Anybody you want to plug, or any websites named Defiance Wrestling you want to plug, or anything like that? Go ahead and do it now.
I want to thank Brian for not devoting me the junior staff member. I want to thank Steph for actually being the senior staff member. I want to tell everybody to go check out DefianceWrestling.com. 100%. When you finish checking it out, check it out again. Then you can go to HowWrestling.com, but then go back to DefianceWrestling.com, please. And then I guess Chad was always great to us, so you can check out the archive of tons of old Efeds at FWrestling.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was something else that I would like to have said. But, yes, and Dusty is going to be bringing back one of the longest running ankle feds in the NBW.com. So if you're looking for a change of pace and you don't want to do Defiance, fuck you. But maybe Dusty's place is something that you'd be interested in. So
there you go. All right, guys. Tom, thank you very much for joining us this week on the Efed podcast. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course. I'm glad you had me, and hopefully, everything works out and we can go out of our house in a month. We'll see.
We'll see. Until then, catch us every Tuesday here on the Efed podcast. All right, guys, that's going to wrap us up for another edition of the Efed podcast. I want to thank our guest, Mr. Tom Ford, for taking the time to do an interview with us. It was a great one. Really enjoyed it. And he's been a buddy for a long time. Want to thank you to all of our sponsors. Of course, AtomicDropcast.com, your weekly knee to the ass bone for your earholes. DefianceWrestling.com, if you're looking for a good angle fed. EWC4Life.com. That's EWC, the number 4, life.com. If you're looking for a good role play fed. And of course, we are Splat.com. Those guys have been with us for a while now. I want to shout out to them as well. Special thanks to our patrons. You can check out the Patreon over at patreon.com/EFED podcast. Want to shout out to those guys. You heard probably a couple of shout outs in the show today, or at least one. That's one of the perks over at the Efed podcast. You get to put your own shout outs in the show. Let me know if you'd like to get involved over at patreon.com. Otherwise, guys, for Brian, I'm Mikey. This is the Efed podcast, where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real.
You've been listening to the Efed podcast, only on the Atomic Jobcast Network, presented commercial free on Patreon.